Find the inverse and graph both. Let's first graph this f of x right now before I even consider the inverse. Now, let's plug in a few points. I'm not sure how many points we can plug in. Let's plug in -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2 and see what we get after we plug those in, and that'll help us figure out what kind of function we have. If I plug in -2, that's going to be -2 times -2 cubed. So let me do that work over here. Big number plus 1. So that's going to be 8 times, that's going to be 17. So we can't even graph that. Let's plug in -1. -2 times -1 cubed plus 1 is going to be -2 times -2, or -2 times -1 rather, which is +2, and 2 plus 1 is 3, so that's manageable. If I plug in 0, I get 1. If I plug in 1, I get -2 times 1 cubed, so -2 plus 1 is -1. And if I plug in 2, I get -2 times 2 cubed. Again, really big number. It's just not going to work out, not even worth it. So the 3 points that I can do is -1, 3, 0, 1, and 1, -1. And since this is a cubic, it's going to look something like this. Now, I'm awful at drawing these, so bear with me. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. All right, so that's what the blue function is going to look like. All right, now I'm going to find the inverse, and I'm going to show you a little trick how to graph its inverse. Okay, so here's the inverse. First things first, I'll call you y. All right, because I don't like f of x. It's just too sloppy for me. First things first is swap the x and the y, so -2y cubed plus 1. Subtract 1, cross you out. X minus 1 equals -2y cubed. Divide everything by -2, gross, cross you out. That leaves me with x minus 1 over -2 equals y cubed. In order to get rid of that cubed, we're going to cube root both sides, like that. Okay, you cancel out. Y will equal the cube root of x minus 1 over -2. So f inverse of x is going to be the cube root of x minus 1 over -2. Now, this is the trick to graphing the inverse if you already have the graph of the original function. We were able to graph 3 points, -1, 3, 0, 1, and 1, -1. We were able to graph those 3 points. When you want to graph the inverse, the trick is flip-flop. So 3, -1, 1, 0, and -1, 1. Why? Well, because the first step that you do is you swap the x and the y. So why would that change here? So 3 points that I can graph would be 3, -1, 1, 0, and -1, 1. So graphing this is going to be very, very, very similar, which means it's going to not look good. But there you have it. And if you're curious as to what the graph of a function and its inverse looks like, what you do is you draw a perfect diagonal line, right? This is the line y equals x. You draw a perfect diagonal line, and your function and your inverse are mirror images over that line. So that's why if you kind of tilt your head sideways, you could see like a butterfly looking thing. Pretty neat stuff. Pretty neat stuff.